Sometimes the quietest miracles arrive when a man has stopped believing anyone will ever find him. For Cole Whitman, it happened on a snow-choked night outside Whitefish, Montana, when a starving German shepherd collapsed on his porch, injured, frozen, and alone. Cole carried him inside, cleaned his wounds, warmed him by the fire, and told himself the dog would leave when the storm passed. Snow fell so heavily over Whitefish, Montana, that the mountains seemed to disappear one tree at a time. By midnight, the old fire lookout cabin near the edge of Flathead National Forest had become a square of yellow light buried in white. Cole Whitman sat alone at the kitchen table listening to the stove tick and the roof complain under the weight. At 44, Cole still carried the shape of the Navy in his shoulders, broad, straight, and ready for trouble, even when no trouble had been invited. His dark brown hair was cut short, because long hair had always felt like one more thing for the world to grab. Silver had started at his temples, though he pretended not to see it when he shaved. His eyes were a hard blue, the color of lake ice before it cracks. People in Whitefish said Cole was polite enough, useful in a storm, and about as talkative as a fence post with classified memories. They were not entirely wrong. He fixed chainsaws for neighbors, pulled trucks from ditches, split wood for widows, and vanished before anyone could ask him to stay for supper. Kindness was easier when it had an exit route. The cabin suited him for that reason. It had one bedroom, one narrow kitchen, one wood stove, and windows that looked out over black timber and long weather. There were no family photographs on the wall, only maps, only tools, only an old cell phone in the top drawer wrapped in a cloth and charged once a week for no sensible reason. 6 years earlier, that phone had held the last missed call from his younger brother, Matthew Whitman. Matthew had been 38 when he vanished, a former combat medic with tired blue eyes, brown hair that never obeyed a comb, and a laugh that could make bad coffee seem like a plan. After he came home from war, sudden noises emptied his face. Crowded rooms made his hands close into fists. He slept in the backyard some nights because walls pressed too near. Cole saw the signs and answered them with discipline. He offered schedules when Matthew needed mercy. He offered advice when Matthew needed a chair beside him in the dark. Then came the call. Cole had been out helping clear a wreck on an icy road when Matthew phoned, and the storm had swallowed the signal. The voicemail was brief. Matthew said he needed quiet. He said he might go north for a few days. He said in a voice thin enough to break that he was sorry for being hard to love. Cole told himself he would call in the morning. Morning brought a search request, then a whiteout, then a county road closed under fallen timber. By the time Cole called back, Matthew was gone. The official search lasted 19 days. Hope lasted longer, meaner, colder. After 2 years, Matthew was declared missing and presumed dead somewhere beyond the North Fork country. Cole signed papers under fluorescent lights and said thank you to people who had failed kindly. Then he moved into the old cabin and let winter teach him how to disappear without leaving town. The snow thickened outside. It pressed against the glass and erased the porch steps. Cole checked the stove, added a split of pine, and opened the drawer. The phone lay there and its cloth black screen cracked at one corner. He did not turn it on. He only touched it with 2 fingers. That was his habit. That was his punishment. Then something scraped at the door. Cole froze. The sound was not wind. Wind pushed, whistled, bullied the eaves. This was smaller. This was a drag of claws over wood, then a soft thump against the threshold. Cole reached for the flashlight on the shelf. His other hand found the old service pistol in the drawer below the maps, not because he wanted to use it, because years of training had taught his body to prepare before his mind had permission to hope. He crossed the room without turning on another light. Through the narrow window beside the door, he saw only snow moving sideways in the porch glow. Then the storm shifted, and a shape appeared against the boards. A German shepherd lay half-curled by the door, black and tan fur clotted with ice, legs folded wrong beneath a body too thin for winter. The dog lifted its head when Cole opened the latch. That small motion looked like it cost him everything. He was not young, but not old. Perhaps 5 years, by the gray showing early around his muzzle and the strength still hidden under starvation. His ribs showed through the wet fur along his sides. His belly looked hollow. One shoulder was torn open in a ragged line where dark blood had frozen into the coat. The pads of his paws were split and red from ice. His right ear had a small tear near the edge. His eyes were amber brown, steady, and terribly awake. He did not whine. That was what struck Cole hardest. An animal that thin should have begged, snapped, or collapsed into panic. This one only watched him, as if he had spent a long time choosing this door. "You picked a bad night," Cole said. His voice sounded strange in the room, rusty from disuse. The dog blinked once. Cole opened the door wider and cold spilled across the floor. "Come on, then." The German shepherd tried to rise and failed. His front leg buckled under him. Cole swore softly, set the pistol on the shelf, and stepped out into the storm. Snow hit his face with needles. The dog smelled of ice, old smoke, blood, and a wild, sour hunger. When Cole slid his arms under the animal, the dog went rigid, but did not bite. "Easy." The word came out gentler than Cole expected. "I know." He lifted the shepherd against his chest. The dog weighed too little. That made anger move through Cole, clean and hot. Someone had let this happen. Someone had allowed a trained, intelligent animal to become a stack of bones under winter fur. Cole carried him inside and kicked the door shut. The cabin seemed to shrink around them. He laid the dog on an old wool blanket near the stove, then knelt beside him with a bowl of warm water and a towel. The shepherd kept his eyes on Cole's hands. He did not trust them. He allowed them. There was a difference, and Cole respected it. Cole cleaned snow from the ears, the chest, the narrow belly. He worked loose chunks of ice from between the toes and felt the tremors rolling under the skin. The shoulder wound was ugly, but not fresh from that hour. The edges had started to swell. Infection was already setting up camp. "You have been carrying this a while," Cole muttered. The dog's tail moved once. It was not a wag. It was more like a receipt. Cole almost smiled. He mixed water with broth and pushed the bowl near the dog's muzzle. The shepherd sniffed, looked at Cole, and turned his head away. "Proud, too." Cole stepped back. Only then did the dog drink, slow and careful, pausing between swallows, as if food had learned tricks before. Cole watched him from the kitchen, arms folded, the stove warming his legs. The cabin smelled of wet fur, pine smoke, iron, blood, and thawing wool. It should have bothered him. It did not. The dog shifted. Under the torn harness strapped across his ribs, something clicked faintly against the buckle. Cole leaned closer. The harness was old, patched with gray tape and half-ripped along one side. Threaded into a hidden sleeve was a small metal tube, no longer than a man's thumb. It was sealed tight with black tape and ice. Cole touched it. The shepherd's head snapped up. A low growl filled the room. Not wild. warning. "All right," Cole said, lifting both hands. "You keep your secrets tonight." The dog held his stare for 3 breaths, then lowered his head again. Outside, a branch cracked somewhere in the timber. The shepherd rose so fast the blanket slid away. Pain made his back legs shake, but he faced the door, teeth bared, ears uneven and sharp. Cole grabbed the flashlight and looked through the window. Only snow. Only the black fence line. Only the forest beyond the clearing, standing silent and deep. The dog growled again, softer now, toward the trees. Cole felt the old phone in the drawer behind him like a second heartbeat. He did not know what had come to his door that night. He only knew the dog had not come merely to be saved. And somewhere beyond the porch light in the thick white dark, something had been following him. Morning came gray and smothered with snow, still falling over the North Fork Road in slow, heavy curtains. The cabin near Whitefish looked smaller beneath daylight, half buried at the porch and breathing smoke into a sky the color of old tin. Cole had slept in pieces. Each time the stove popped, he opened his eyes and found the German shepherd watching him from the blanket. The dog had not moved much. That worried Cole. An animal too tired to pace could be worse off than an animal that snapped at shadows. He knelt by the hearth with coffee cooling on the floor beside him and held the back of his hand near the dog's shoulder. Heat pulsed through the fur. Not good. "You and I are going to have a problem," Cole said. The shepherd looked at the coffee, then at him. "No, not that." The dog gave the smallest huff through his nose. It might have been pain. It might have been judgment. Cole chose to take it personally. He cut away the ruined strip of harness near the wound and cleaned the shoulder again with warm water. The dog trembled, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the far wall. He did not cry out. Cole had seen men take stitches with less dignity. He wrapped the shoulder with gauze from an old first aid tin and taped it clean. The paws came next. Cracked pads, torn edges, a sliver of ice-burned skin between 2 toes. Cole worked slowly. The dog allowed every touch until Cole reached the small metal tube hidden in the harness. Then the shepherd lifted his head. Not a growl this time, just a look. It said plainly enough that the tube mattered. "I know," Cole said. "But if there is a name in there, it might help you." The dog did not relax. "It might help me too." That was the truth, and perhaps the dog heard something different in it. His head lowered by an inch. Cole waited another moment, then slid the tube free. The tape stuck to the fabric, brittle with cold. He used his knife to split it without damaging the metal. Inside was a rolled scrap of waterproof paper and a small flat tag wrapped in plastic. The paper had blurred at the edges, but several words remained. Red Meadow Cache. Below that was a string of numbers that looked like a coordinate. The tag was more troubling. 2 letters had survived the rubbing of years. M.W. Cole stopped breathing. The stove ticked. The dog watched him without blinking. M.W. Matthew Whitman. It could have meant anything. Initials were cheap. Metal traveled. People sold old gear, lost old gear through. Memory into junk boxes and called it cleaning. Cole told himself all of that. His hand still shook. The cabin door opened before he could fold the paper again. "If you are dead, I am keeping your generator," Miriam Foster called from the porch. Cole closed his fist around the tag. Door was not locked. That is because men who live alone in storms enjoy being found frozen upright. Miriam came in carrying a canvas bag and a pot wrapped in towels. She was 66, short broad in the shoulder, with white hair braided down her back and brown eyes that had learned to spot nonsense from across a church basement. Her late husband had fixed railway engines. Miriam had fixed children, drunks, hunters, burn victims, and one mayor who fainted during a pancake breakfast. She took one look at the dog and set the pot on the table. "Well," she said, "that is not a squirrel." Cole glanced at her. "You came over in this? I saw your porch light on at 3 in the morning and heard something that was either a wounded animal or you trying to sing." "I do not sing." "Then the animal needed help." The shepherd lifted his head slightly. Miriam stopped 5 feet away, not crowding him, hands open at her sides. "Hello, sweetheart." The dog studied her with amber eyes. For a moment, Cole expected the warning growl. Instead, the shepherd put his chin back down. Miriam's face softened, but only for a second. "He is thin enough to slide under a locked door," I noticed. "He needs antibiotics." "I know." "And calories." "I know that too." Knowing does not impress infection. Cole took the pot from the towels and smelled chicken broth rice and enough garlic to scare half the county. "You bring soup for me or the dog?" "Whichever one learns manners first." Cole almost laughed. It surprised him enough that he looked away. Miriam noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything and filed it where she could use it later. The landline was dead. Cell service had vanished behind the storm before dawn. Miriam said the animal clinic in Whitefish kept an emergency line, but the road would not be passable until county plows reached the bend past Polebridge Road. That might be hours. It might be a day. The shepherd lifted his muzzle toward the broth. Cole ladled a small amount into a shallow pan and cooled it with snow from a clean bowl by the door. He placed it near the blanket. The dog did not move. Cole stepped back. The dog looked at Miriam. Miriam turned her back with great ceremony and began writing in a blue notebook she had produced from her coat pocket. 7:43, she said. "Offended by audience while eating." The dog drank. Cole looked down to hide a smile. The room grew quieter after that. Snow softened every sound from outside. Miriam wrote down wound status, water intake, broth intake, and the fact that Cole had not eaten since yesterday. He told her to leave that out. She wrote it darker. At the table, Cole unrolled the paper again. Miriam read over his shoulder and did not pretend she was not doing it. "Red Meadow," she said. "That is north of here. Old logging area. Also where Matthew's search team lost the trail in the second week." Cole's jaw tightened. He had not expected her to say the name. Miriam had known Matthew. Everyone had known Matthew in the way small towns know wounded men, with affection, gossip, and helpless distance. "The initials could be anyone," Cole said. "Could be." "You do not sound convinced." "I have reached an age where coincidences either mean nothing or mean the Lord is tired of whispering." Cole hated that this landed somewhere inside him. The shepherd finished the broth and with grave effort pushed the pan across the floor with his nose. It stopped against Cole's boot. "Subtle," Cole said. Miriam wrote again. 8:02 dog requests more service from staff. Cole cleaned the pan and prepared another small portion. The dog's eyes followed every motion. Under hunger and fever there was training. Under training there was purpose. Cole could feel it in the room. He could also feel the phone in the drawer. The old cell had no service plan, but he kept a small emergency battery pack beside it. He did not know why he took it out. Maybe because the initials had opened a door. Maybe because Miriam had said Matthew's name. Maybe because the dog was staring at the drawer as if he knew what slept inside it. Cole plugged in the cracked phone. The screen stayed dark. Then it flickered. A dead blue glow filled the kitchen. The voicemail icon appeared old and useless, preserved like a fly under ice. Cole's thumb hovered. "Cole," Miriam said quietly. He pressed play. Static breathed through the tiny speaker. Then Matthew's voice came into the cabin, thin, tired, and 6 years gone. "I just need somewhere quiet." The shepherd's whole body changed. He rose on shaking legs before Cole could stop him. His ears angled forward, his mouth opened not in threat, but recognition. Matthew's voice continued, breaking at the edges. "I am sorry for being hard to love." Duke, though Cole had not named him yet, stepped toward the phone with a soft sound in his throat. Cole felt the room tilt. The dog pressed his nose to the speaker. Then he turned toward the door and stared into the white morning, as if the voice had come not from the phone, but from somewhere waiting under the snow. By late afternoon, the storm buried the North Fork in a silence so thick that even the pines seemed to hold their breath. Inside the Whitefish cabin, the fire burned low and red, while snow packed itself against the windows like a second wall. The power failed just after 3. One moment, the small lamp hummed beside the stove. The next, the room fell back into firelight and the heavy breathing of the German shepherd on the blanket. Cole did not curse. He saved curses for useful occasions. This one deserved planning. Miriam had stayed because leaving would have been foolish, and because she had the moral flexibility to ignore any order that sounded like a lonely man trying to protect his pride. She sat at the table with her blue notebook, wool hat still on, pencil moving under the glow of a battery lantern. "Shoulder hotter," she said. "Paw swelling increasing. I can see it. I am saying it for the record." "What record?" "The one that will explain why I hit you with a skillet if you pretend he can wait until morning." The shepherd raised his head at the word skillet. Cole looked at him. "You are not getting one." The dog's eyes narrowed. Miriam wrote something down. "Do not write that." "I wrote possible appetite." Cole checked the landline again. Dead. The cell phone gave him one ghost bar, then none. The road below the cabin had vanished under snow and fallen limbs. Even if the truck started, the descent toward town would be a white ditch with opinions. Dr. Natalie Hayes was somewhere in Whitefish with medicine Duke needed, but town might as well have been across an ocean. Miriam tapped her pencil against the notebook. "My shed has Henry's old battery pack, a hand radio, splints, saline, and the animal kit." Cole looked at the dark window. "Your place is half a mile." "Less if you cut behind the first stand." "In this storm?" "No, Cole, during the 4th of July parade." The shepherd made that small breath again, the one that sounded too much like judgment. Cole pointed at him. "Do not take her side." Duke, because the name had arrived sometime between broth and fever, put his head down with the satisfied dignity of a man who had won a court case. Cole had not meant to name him. Names made a thing harder to lose. Still, when he had carried more water to the blanket and said, "Here, Duke," the dog had lifted his eyes. That was that. Some names did not arrive. They reported for duty. Cole pulled on his parka and gloves. Duke tried to rise. "No." The dog froze, not obeying so much as measuring the cost of disobedience. "You stay." Duke's front leg shook under him. Cole softened his voice. "I will be back." The words nearly choked him. He had said something like that before, though not to a dog. He had said it to Matthew in a hospital parking lot years ago. After a family dinner that ended with Matthew flinching under fireworks from the baseball field. I will call you tomorrow. He had not. Then the last voicemail came. Cole's hand stiffened on the doorknob. The cabin blurred. He smelled road salt and diesel from the night he missed the call. He saw the phone lighting in the console after hours of storm work. Miriam touched his elbow. "Not there," she said. "Go to the shed." Cole swallowed. "I know the difference." "Sometimes you do." That was fair, which made it worse. He opened the door. Snow drove into the room. Duke lifted his head, amber eyes bright with fever and protest. "Stay," Cole repeated. Then he stepped out and shut the door against the dog's stare. The world outside had no edges. The porch, the yard, the split-rail fence, the narrow path through the firs, all of it had become one moving sheet of white. Cole clicked on the flashlight and kept the beam low. High beams in snow lied. Low light told the truth, badly, but enough. He moved by memory, keeping the slope on his right and the shallow creek bed on his left. Each step punched through crust into powder. Cold worked under his collar. His old shoulder, damaged in a training fall and insulted by years of pretending it was fine, began to burn. He counted steps. 30, 40, 50. Counting had carried him through worse nights. It did not comfort him, but it gave the fear something boring to do. Halfway to Miriam's property, the ground vanished beneath his right boot. Cole dropped hard. His hip hit ice. The flashlight spun away, throwing wild white circles through the trees. His left arm caught a root. Pain exploded through his shoulder so bright that the snow seemed to flash blue. Below him, hidden under a soft crust, a drainage ditch opened black and narrow. Freezing water moved at the bottom over broken stones. His boots scraped and found nothing. "No," he gasped. The word came out before he chose it. The root cracked. His body slid another inch. He thought of Matthew's voicemail again, that thin apology asking the world for less weight. Cole had been too late for that call. His fingers slipped. Then teeth seized the back of his coat. Cole went still. A low growl vibrated through the fabric. Duke, shaking so hard his legs nearly folded, had planted himself on the path and clamped down on Cole's parka. "Duke." The dog pulled. Not much. Enough. Cole kicked against the culvert edge until his boot found a buried stone. He shoved upward. Pain ran from shoulder to jaw. Duke dragged backward, claws tearing through snow crust, wounded paw leaving red marks in the white. "Stop," Cole said, though he did not mean it. Duke ignored him. They gained 6 inches, then a foot. Cole rolled onto solid ground and lay on his back, chest heaving, snow falling into his open mouth. Duke collapsed beside him with a torn piece of Cole's coat still between his teeth. For one absurd second, Cole stared at that scrap. Then he laughed. It broke halfway through and became something rougher, but it was alive. "You stubborn, skinny fool." Duke's torn ear twitched. "Yes, I know who said it." Cole pushed himself upright and pressed his forehead against the dog's cold neck. Duke did not pull away. That permission hit Cole harder than the fall. He wrapped the dog in his coat as best he could and abandoned the trip to Miriam's shed. The return took twice as long. Cole kept one hand under Duke's chest and the other on the flashlight. The dog limped, stumbled, and kept moving with a discipline that made Cole angry at whoever had taught him to suffer so quietly. When they reached the cabin, clearing, blue and red light turned in the snow. A county patrol truck sat in front of the porch with its engine running. Miriam stood in the doorway, arms folded tight. Beside her stood a tall man in a green winter uniform, broad through the chest, hat pulled low. a metal leash clipped to his belt. Duke stopped dead, every muscle locked. The deputy turned. His gray eyes moved from Cole's torn coat to the blood tracks in the snow, to Duke's bandaged shoulder. "Mr. Whitman," he called over the wind. "Step away from the dog." Duke's growl rose deep and wounded. Cole moved one pace in front of him. "No." The patrol light spun across the white yard like a warning that had already made up its mind. Snow blew sideways across the porch, and the patrol lights painted the cabin walls blue-red, then blue again. Inside the old lookout near Whitefish, the room smelled of wet wool, smoke, blood, and trouble wearing county boots. Deputy Caleb Ross shut the door with his shoulder and kept his gloved hands visible. He was 37, tall and solid, with dark blonde hair flattened by his winter hat, a short beard, and gray eyes that looked tired before they looked hard. There was a scar along his left jaw, pale against wind-burned skin. Cole noticed it because noticing scars was easier than noticing fear. "That dog needs to be secured," Caleb said. "That dog just pulled me out of a drainage ditch. He also matches a report of an injured German shepherd seen near a restricted wildlife corridor. The squirrels file that report." Miriam looked at Cole. "Sarcasm 1116, poor timing." Caleb did not smile. His gaze stayed on Duke, who stood close to Cole's knee, with his head low and his teeth half showing. The dog was shaking from fever and cold, but the growl in his chest had a shape to it. Not attack. Memory. Caleb heard it too. His right hand drifted toward the metal leash clipped to his belt. Duke's whole body flinched at the tiny clink. His ears snapped back. He pressed himself lower, not lunging, not retreating, trapped between both. Cole saw the reaction and stepped farther between them. "Do not touch that leash." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "You do not give orders in a county animal safety call." "I do when the thing you are doing is making him worse." Miriam moved between the two men with the weary confidence of a woman who had broken up more foolishness than either of them had started. "Both of you take one breath before someone begins speaking in badges and jaw muscles." Caleb looked at her. "Ma'am, I received a call from dispatch. I am aware of what phones do." An injured dog wandering alone can mean rabies risk, aggression risk, or an owner in danger. Then let us find out which one before we punish him for being alive. That landed. Not enough to change Caleb's face, but enough to stop his hand. Cole guided Duke back toward the blanket. The dog resisted until Cole lowered his voice. "Easy." Duke looked up at him. "I am here." The dog stepped backward 1 foot at a time and lowered himself near the stove with a groan he tried to hide. Caleb watched that, and something tightened around his mouth. "He obeys you." "Sometimes." "Name." "Duke." Miriam wrote it down. Cole gave her a look. "What?" "Names belong in records." Caleb set a small scanner on the table. "I need to check for a chip." "He is hurt." "I can see that." "Then see the rest." Cole pulled back the blanket just enough for the deputy to see the ribs, the swollen shoulder, the raw paw pads, and the old pressure scars under the harness line. Caleb's jaw shifted. He had not expected hunger to have that much architecture. Some dogs run for weeks. This was not weeks. Miriam's voice softened, which somehow made it sharper. This was seasons. Duke's eyes followed the scanner when Caleb picked it up. The device gave a small electronic chirp. The dog jerked as if someone had touched fire to his skin. He scrambled up too fast, wounded leg folding. Cole caught him under the chest. Turn it off. I need the number. Turn it off and move slower. Caleb's pride rose visibly. Then he looked at Duke's face. The dog was not trying to bite. He was trying not to remember. Caleb switched the scanner off. Fine. He crouched lower than before, turned his body sideways, and waited. Cole felt Miriam watching him too. Not the dog. Him. As if she knew this was the real test. Cole rested one hand on Duke's neck. He is going to pass that thing over you. Duke panted, eyes bright. It is just noise. The dog's body trembled under Cole's palm. I know. Caleb moved the scanner without turning it on, letting Duke see the shape. Then he activated it only when the device was already close to the shoulder. One chirp. Duke flinched, but did not bolt. Another chirp. The scanner caught. Caleb read the number into his radio, though the signal crackled like paper burning. Dispatch took several tries to respond. While they waited, Miriam warmed more broth and muttered at both men to sit before their stubbornness froze, standing up. Cole did not sit. Neither did Caleb. The radio finally hissed. Chip registered to Matthew Whitman, Whitefish, Montana. The room changed. Cole heard the stove. He heard snow tapping the window. He heard Duke's breathing beside him. Everything else moved far away. Caleb looked up slowly. Relation. Cole's mouth felt dry. My brother. Miriam closed her notebook. For once, she did not write. The radio continued through static. Owner status listed, missing, presumed deceased. Cole shut his eyes. He had heard those words in offices at search briefings over coffee from paper cups inside dreams, where Matthew kept walking away through trees and never turned around. They did not become easier with repetition. Caleb lowered the radio. I am sorry. Cole did not answer. Duke leaned his weight against Cole's leg only a little. It was enough. Caleb looked back at the scanner. There is another note. Cole opened his eyes. Read it. Caleb hesitated. Animal status entered by county search record 6 years ago. Read it. Caleb's voice lost some of its official edge. Deceased, unconfirmed, presumed lost in same winter incident. Duke lifted his head at Matthew's name from the radio, not understanding the words but knowing the shape of the voice around them. Cole stared at the dog. 6 years. The number sat in the cabin like a stone dropped through ice. If Duke belonged to Matthew, and Duke had been presumed dead, then either the record was wrong, or the mountain had been carrying more secrets than any of them had known. Caleb cleared his throat. Protocol says I should transport him for observation. Duke's growl returned at the word transport, low and immediate. Cole's hand tightened on his collar. No. Mr. Whitman. No. Miriam stepped forward again. Deputy Ross, if you put that dog in a metal box tonight, he may not survive the trip. If he is linked to a missing person case, I need chain of custody. Then keep custody here. Caleb looked at her as if she had suggested filing court papers with a soup spoon. She lifted her chin. You can sit at my table, drink my coffee, and watch a sick dog not die. Cole almost said something. Miriam's look stopped him. Caleb glanced at Duke, at the bandage at the old harness, at Cole's torn coat still damp from the drainage ditch. There was history behind his eyes. Not Matthew's. His own. For 1 second, Cole saw a younger version of the deputy standing in snow with a leash in his hand and nothing at the other end. Then Caleb put the scanner away, Temporary exception, Cole exhaled. Do not thank me, Caleb said. I am not. Good. Miriam wrote again. 11:43 men performed gratitude by insulting air. The wind hit the cabin hard enough to rattle the stovepipe. Duke's head snapped toward the back window. His ears rose. Beyond the glass, the forest stood thick and white, but something darker moved between the trunks. It was there only a second. Maybe a branch shifting. Maybe a deer. Maybe nothing. Duke struggled to his feet and limped toward the door. Cole followed his gaze. On the scanner screen, still glowing in Caleb's hand, a second line appeared under the chip record. Last known search sector, Red Meadow. Beside it was a status note Cole had never seen before. Recovered evidence sealed, pending family notification. No one spoke. Then Duke pressed his bloody paw against the door and whined once, soft and urgent, toward the buried road north. Morning came without sunrise. Only a paler shade of white over the woods north of Whitefish. Snow lay deep against the cabin walls, and every pine beyond the clearing bent under its burden like an old man keeping a secret. Dr. Natalie Hayes arrived just after 8 in a mud-streaked four-wheel drive truck with chains on the tires and no patience for anyone calling her heroic. She was 35, slim and steady, with dark hair tucked under a knit cap, calm brown eyes, and the practical hands of someone who had learned that fear in an animal always reached the skin before the wound did. Caleb had radioed her before dawn. Miriam had called her from the county repeater after that, because Miriam trusted no message delivered only once. Natalie stepped into the cabin carrying a medical case and a canvas bag of fluids. She looked at Cole, then Caleb, then Miriam, and then Duke. Everyone who can talk moves back, she said. Miriam nodded. I like her. Cole moved back because Duke needed the exam. His body did not enjoy the decision. Duke watched Natalie approach with the silent attention of a soldier measuring a door. Natalie crouched sideways several feet away and set her open hand on the floor. Hey, handsome. Duke did not move. No flattery, she asked. Tough room. His torn ear twitched. Cole saw Natalie's gaze catch on the ribs, the raw paw pads, the old harness scars, the infected shoulder. Her face did not change much, but her mouth became smaller. This did not happen in a week. How long? Caleb asked. Natalie slid a thermometer cover into place. Long enough that I am going to hate the answer. The exam took nearly an hour. Duke allowed it because Cole stayed near his head and because Natalie moved like a person who knew permission could be lost in half a second. She checked teeth, eyes, ears, joints, wounds, old scars, hydration, weight, and the condition of his coat. Each finding landed in Miriam's notebook. Severe underweight. Old pressure lesions. Recent shoulder laceration. Split paw pads. Probable infection. Evidence of long-term exposure. Possible prior working dog training. When Natalie cleaned the shoulder deeper, Duke's lips peeled back without sound. Cole put one hand flat on the floor, not touching him. Stay with me. Duke's eyes flicked to him. Good. The dog held. Natalie administered antibiotics and fluids, then wrapped the shoulder with a cleaner bandage. He is not a wild stray, she said. He knew every step of that exam before he decided whether to let me continue. Military? Caleb asked. Maybe search and rescue, maybe service work. Maybe someone trained him privately. Cole looked at the chip record on Caleb's tablet. Matthew was a medic. Natalie glanced at him. Then he would have known how to care for a dog in the field. That sentence entered the cabin and sat beside the stove. Cole did not answer it. Duke's nose moved toward the chair where Cole had draped Matthew's old jacket. The jacket had come out of a storage box before dawn. Cole had no memory of deciding to bring it down from the loft. He only remembered holding it in both hands while the cabin was quiet, pressing his face into wool that no longer smelled like his brother. Or so he thought. Duke disagreed. He rose too fast, stumbled, and dragged himself toward the chair. Cole caught him under the chest. Easy. Duke ignored the word and pushed his muzzle deep into the jacket. His whole body went still. Then he made a sound so low Cole felt it more than heard it. Not a bark, not a whine. Recognition. Miriam's pencil stopped. Caleb's face changed in the smallest way. Natalie looked from the dog to Cole. That is his person. Cole swallowed. Was. Duke turned toward him. Amber eyes, fever bright, held him without mercy. Cole could almost hear Matthew in that look, correcting him with the same quiet stubbornness. Not was. Not yet. The dog pulled away from the jacket and limped to the front door. He pressed his nose to the bottom crack where wind breathed in powdered snow. Then he looked back. The cabin went very still. Absolutely not, Natalie said. Duke stared at Cole. He can barely stand, she added. Duke took one step toward the door. He needs rest. Another step. Miriam closed her notebook with a soft slap. He also seems to have an opinion. Caleb rubbed his forehead. Every person in this room is about to make my report worse. Cole crossed to the door and looked out through the glass. Snow had stopped falling for the moment. The world beyond the clearing was white-blue and silent. Fresh tracks from the patrol truck cut across the yard. Beyond them, near the broken fence, the timber waited. Red Meadow is north, Cole said. Not far as a crow flies. Nobody here is a crow, Caleb said. The logging track is buried. Then we do not take the track. Natalie stood. If you take him out now, you risk reopening the shoulder and dropping his temperature. Cole looked at Duke. If we keep him here, what do we risk? No one answered. That was answer enough. They prepared like people trying to outsmart common sense rather than ignore it. Natalie added a weatherproof layer over Duke's bandage and made Cole carry a sling in case the dog collapsed. Miriam packed broth, gauze, aspirin for humans, none for the dog, which she announced twice, and sandwiches. No one admitted wanting. Caleb checked radio channels, beacon, battery, and weather alerts. Cole packed rope flares, a folding saw, thermal blankets, and Matthew's jacket sealed in a plastic bag. Duke waited at the door, thin body trembling with impatience. When Cole opened it, the dog stepped into the snow and turned toward the trees as if the storm had left him a road. They moved slowly behind the cabin, past the woodpile and the frozen water barrel, to a stand of firs where snow hung in thick shelves from the branches. Duke's nose stayed low for 20 yards. Then he lifted his head and angled toward a deadfall half buried beneath powder. Cole saw nothing. Duke nosed under the snow beside a cracked trunk. He pawed once, then winced. Cole knelt and dug with his gloves. Under the snow tied around a young pine was a strip of green paracord. The knot was tight, practical, and old. Cole stopped with his fingers on it. The world narrowed to wet nylon under his glove. He knew that knot. Years ago, in their father's garage, Cole had taught Matthew to tie it after Matthew used 3 bad knots to hang a deer bag and dropped it straight into a bucket of paint. Matthew had laughed until their father threatened to make him clean the garage with a toothbrush. Cole touched the knot again. Caleb crouched beside him. You sure? I tied this into his bootlaces when he would not practice. Miriam's voice came softly from behind. He remembered. Duke watched Cole. The dog did not celebrate. He simply waited for the man to catch up. Cole rose with Snow on his knees. There will be more. Duke turned north. Before they had taken 10 steps, Caleb's radio crackled. Dispatch came through broken but clear enough. Recovered evidence file from Whitman's search includes sealed item from Red Meadow sector. Cole stopped. The radio hissed again. Description says canine collar fragment and blood-stained field dressing. Duke lifted his head at the sound of the voice. From somewhere deeper in the forest, a branch snapped. Not under snow, under weight. Duke gave one sharp bark and lunged toward the sound, dragging Cole's hand tight on the sling. The forest north of Whitefish held the cold in layers. Snow above ice above mud, and silence under all of it. Beyond the cabin, clearing Flathead timber rose dark and close, the kind of woods that made a man feel watched, even when nothing living moved. Duke led them through it with a limp that worsened by the hour. That should have slowed him. Instead, it made every choice more deliberate. He stepped around hollow snow where brush had made false ground. He avoided the smooth slopes where powder hid wet rock. He paused at creek crossings until Cole understood which stones were real and which were only white pillows waiting to betray a boot. Caleb followed with the radio clipped high on his jacket and his hand never far from the rope. Miriam had stayed at the cabin because Natalie had given her the job of monitoring the emergency line, and because someone had to keep the stove hot enough for whatever came back. Natalie had stayed too, though she did not like it. "Bring me a living dog," she had said. Then, after a glance at Cole, "and whatever men he drags behind him." Cole had not promised. Promises had become expensive. They pushed north for nearly an hour, passing through firs heavy with snow, and into a lower hollow where old cedar trunks rose wide as chapel doors. Duke slowed near a tilted wall of stone, almost invisible behind hanging branches. He stopped, sniffed, and looked back. Cole felt his chest tighten. Caleb saw it. "What?" "Shelter country." Cole pushed through the branches. Behind them, tucked against the rock, was a lean-to made from dead limbs, bark strips, and a sheet of plastic faded almost gray. Snow had sealed the lower edges. The structure was old, sagging, and still smart. It kept wind off the back. It shed water away from the floor. It sat low enough that smoke from a hidden fire would have broken apart before reaching the canopy. Matthew had built it. Cole knew before finding proof. He crouched at the entrance, but did not go in right away. His breath fogged the air. For a moment, he saw Matthew inside that dark space, knees drawn up, field jacket around his shoulders, eyes open while Winter leaned on the roof. Caleb stood behind him and said nothing. That helped. Cole crawled inside. The floor was raised with old cedar boughs, flattened into a brown mat. Near the entrance, under a stone, lay a tin cup. It was dented on the rim, handle bent inward. Cole picked it up, and the years folded. Matthew at 12, burning oatmeal over a camp stove and declaring it textured. Matthew at 21, drinking terrible coffee from the same cup because good things, he claimed, were often too delicate for the field. Matthew at 38, somewhere in these woods, still carrying the ugly cup like a stubborn little lamp from childhood. Cole sat back on his heels. Anger rose in him because anger was easier than grief. If Matthew had this cup, if he built this shelter, if he marked the trees, then he had been alive after the search moved south. He had been alive while Cole slept, ate signed papers, and let people tell him the mountain had won. Duke crawled halfway into the shelter and rested his muzzle on Cole's boot. Not comfort exactly, an interruption. Cole gripped the cup until the metal bit his glove. Why did he not come home? Caleb answered slowly. Maybe home felt harder than weather. Cole looked at him. The deputy's face was turned toward the trees, not Cole. There was an old hurt in the line of his jaw. You know something about that? Caleb breathed out through his nose. I know a dog can be trained to find people and still not understand why people leave each other. Duke lifted his head. Caleb looked down at him. Not you. Duke blinked. Mostly not you. They searched the shelter with care. Under the cedar mat, Cole found a strip of thermal fabric cut into bandages. Near the rock wall, he found a page from a field notebook, the paper soft but readable inside a plastic sleeve. The handwriting was Matthew's. Cole knew it by the way the letters leaned right, impatient, as if they wanted to leave the page before the hand finished. The notes listed cash points. Food low. Shoulder infection improved. Duke found water below Cedar Notch. Cole read that line 3 times. Duke found water, Caleb said. So Duke was with him. At least then. The dog looked from one man to the other, unimpressed by their slow arrival at obvious facts. They moved on. The next point was a dry notch between 2 roots near a creek protected by alder branches. There, Cole found a fire ring no wider than a dinner plate and a reflector made from a blackened strip of metal. This was no lost hiker's panic fire. This was concealment. Matthew had been hiding. The thought made Cole's teeth ache. He wanted to be furious. He wanted Matthew alive enough to shake. He wanted to ask why a man could survive snow, hunger, infection, and fear, but not cross the last miles home. Then Duke, with his ribs showing and one paw bleeding through the fresh wrap, leaned against Cole's leg. The fury did not vanish. It changed weight. Maybe Matthew had not been choosing against Cole. Maybe he had been choosing against rooms, questions, pity, noise, the shame of needing rescue from his own mind. That did not forgive the lost years. It made them human. Worse, somehow. They climbed toward Red Meadow after noon. The name promised openness, but winter had turned the place into a white bowl ringed with black timber. Snow lay smooth across the clearing except where deer had stitched faint tracks near the edge. Duke crossed the meadow without hesitation. Halfway through, he stopped beside a young spruce bowed under ice. He began to dig. No, Cole said. Your paw. Duke dug again, slower, stubborn as a judge. Caleb crouched and helped. Together they cleared powder crust and frozen leaves from a patch of raised ground. Under the snow, the soil was packed hard around a flat stone. Cole removed the stone. The metal beneath it flashed dull silver. For a second, no one moved. Then Cole brushed away the dirt with his thumb. A dog tag lay twisted in a rust-dark chain. Not the small tag from Duke's harness, a soldier's tag. Cole wiped it against his sleeve. Letters emerged. Matthew Whitman. The meadow seemed to fall silent in a different way. Cole sank back into the snow. The tag sat in his palm, cold and impossible. 6 years of paperwork, memorial prayers, search maps, and late-night punishments collapsed into one dirty rectangle. Caleb took off his hat. He did not say he was sorry again. Cole preferred that. Duke sat in front of him, thin chest heaving, amber eyes fixed on Cole's face. The dog had led him here not to prove death. Cole understood that suddenly. If Duke had wanted to mourn, he could have stayed with the tag. He had come to Cole because the trail continued. Cole closed his fingers around the metal. You knew I would recognize it. Duke's torn ear tilted. Of course you did. Caleb's radio crackled sharply. Weather update for North Fork units. Static chewed the words, then released enough. Avalanche warning elevated near Old Ice Road and Red Meadow drainage. Cole stood. At the far edge of the meadow, Duke had already turned toward a narrow gap in the trees. Hanging from a branch there, half hidden by snow, was a strip of orange cloth. It moved once in the wind, like a hand trying to be seen. Snow returned during the night. Soft at first, then thick enough by dawn to blur the edge of the porch. Cole stood outside the Whitefish cabin with Matthew's dog tag in his chest pocket and felt the forest pulling on him like a call he had already failed once. He no longer pretended the trips were patrols. He packed for rescue. Rope, flares, thermal blankets, medical tape, water, food for Duke in small portions. Matthew's jacket sealed in plastic. The old tin cup wrapped in cloth because Cole could not make himself leave it on the table. Miriam watched him from the doorway with a mug in one hand and her blue notebook in the other. You plan to carry half the county? Only the useful half. Then take me. No. I was afraid you would say something stupid. Natalie came from the stove where she had been checking Duke's bandage. He can go for a short distance, but if he collapses, you carry him immediately. Duke lifted his head. Natalie looked at him. Do not give me that look. Duke gave it harder. I work with patients who bite, she said. You are not special. Miriam wrote, veterinarian lies to dog for morale. Cole should not have smiled. He did anyway. Caleb arrived at 7 with fresh batteries, county maps, and a thermos he claimed was coffee but smelled like someone had threatened water with beans. He avoided looking at Duke for the first minute. Then Duke pushed his nose against Caleb's knee and left a smear of broth there. Caleb looked down. Is that a greeting or evidence? With him, probably both, Cole said. They left as the light grew gray. Miriam and Natalie stayed behind to maintain the radio, warm the cabin, and prepare for the kind of return no one said aloud. Duke led Cole and Caleb north again, this time beyond Red Meadow into rougher country, where old logging paths had become nothing more than pale lines under snow. The dog moved slowly, but with an assurance that made the map in Caleb's hand feel decorative. Every so often, he stopped at a tree or stone, waited for Cole to notice, then moved on. A strip of orange cloth tied high in a fur, a dry cache of charred wood beneath a slab of rock, a notch cut into bark at shoulder height, a shallow sitting hollow lined with bark on a south-facing slope. The signs were small, too small for a search team moving fast under weather pressure, too clear for a brother who now understood the language. Matthew had built a circuit. That was the word Caleb used when they stopped beneath a cliff where the wind could not reach. A survival circuit. Cole looked at the map. Shelter, water, wood, observation point. Close enough to reach when weak. Hidden enough to avoid people. Caleb's voice was quiet. He was not wandering. No. He was staying alive. Cole folded the map too sharply. And staying away. Duke sat in the snow with a tired exhale that fogged around his muzzle. Cole looked at the dog and regretted the bitterness as soon as it left him. The animal had no patience for simple anger. He had lived inside the harder truth. Caleb leaned against a tree and stared down the slope. I had a canine named Hank. Cole waited. Caleb did not seem like a man who opened old doors unless something had already broken the lock. Avalanche call 5 winters ago. He rubbed one glove against the other. Bad slope, bad information. Too much pressure to move fast. Cole said nothing. Hank hit scent near a buried snowmobiler. Caleb's jaw tightened. I sent him ahead because that was the procedure, and because I trusted the snow less than I trusted him. The wind moved powder off a branch above them. Caleb watched it fall. Second slide came down. Duke's ears shifted toward him. We got the snowmobiler out. Caleb swallowed. I never got Hank back. Cole looked at the metal leash clipped to Caleb's belt. He understood it now. Not control, guilt made into hardware. That why you wanted Duke transported? Part of it. Other part. If I call a dog dangerous, I do not have to call him brave. That was honest enough to hurt. Duke rose and limped to Caleb. The deputy stiffened but did not move away. Duke sniffed the metal leash once, then nudged Caleb's hand with his nose. Caleb let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You are manipulative. Duke blinked. That was not praise. Cole felt humor pass through him, brief and warm. Then Duke turned sharply toward the trees. The mood changed with him. They climbed another quarter-mile to a stand of lodgepole pine where the snow was deeper and the air colder. Duke nosed under a fallen trunk and pawed at a sheet of bark wedged into the hollow. Cole pulled it free. Inside was another waterproof sleeve. The paper within had survived better than the others. Matthew's handwriting filled half the page. Cole read silently until the words began to swim. Caleb stepped closer. What does it say? Cole handed it to him because his own voice had left. Caleb read aloud, careful and slow. If Duke reaches Cole, I am below the ice road. The forest stopped being merely cold. It became listening. Cole took the paper back. Below the ice road. The old ice road was a winter logging route cut years ago along the edge of a ravine north of Red Meadow. Dangerous in good weather, stupid in a storm. Exactly the kind of place Matthew might have used to avoid official trails. Duke pressed forward as if the note had freed him from waiting. Natalie's warning came through Cole's memory. If he collapses, you carry him. Cole adjusted the sling on his pack. We go slow. Duke ignored the tone and took 3 determined steps. Caleb called the cabin on the radio, gave the location, and requested SAR standby. Miriam answered with static around her voice. Copy that. Then softer. Bring everyone home. Cole did not promise. He followed Duke into the pines. The ground began to slope downward. Snow grew crusted and blue in shaded hollows. Once Duke slipped, and Caleb caught him under the harness before Cole could reach him. Both men froze. Duke looked offended. Caleb looked shaken. Sorry, Caleb said to the dog. Duke huffed and continued. At the top of a narrow ridge, the trees opened. Below them lay the old ice road, a pale scar cutting along the side of a ravine. Wind had swept parts of it clean, leaving gray ice shining through powder. On the far side, tied to a dead branch and snapping weakly in the weather, hung a strip of blue fabric. Duke gave a single, low whine. Then he started down before either man could stop him. Cole grabbed for the harness and missed. The dog vanished over the lip of the trail, leaving only 3 red paw marks in the snow. The old ice road north of Red Meadow lay under a hard white sky, silent except for wind moving loose snow across the ravine. Far below, water ran beneath ice with a muffled sound like distant breathing. Cole dropped to one knee at the ridge edge. Duke! No bark answered. Only the wind and the faint clatter of ice sliding somewhere below. Caleb anchored the rope around a lodgepole pine, his hands moving fast and clean. Do not rush. He went over. That is why I said do not rush. Cole hated him for being right. He clipped in, checked the knot, and eased down the slope toward the old road. His shoulder complained with every shift of weight. The snow crust broke under his boots in thin, dangerous sheets. Halfway down, he heard Duke breathing, not barking, panting, determined, harsh, close. Cole followed the sound to a narrow ledge beneath the road where blackberry vines, dead grass, and drifted snow hid the entrance to a small washout. Duke stood there, sides heaving, front paw lifted, nose pointed at a tangle of roots under the ledge. The blue fabric snapped from a branch above him. "You trying to kill every person who likes you?" Duke gave him a look over one shoulder. "Fair." Cole reached him and slid one arm under his chest. The dog leaned against him for exactly 2 seconds, then pushed toward the roots again. Caleb descended behind them and crouched near the ledge. "The slope above is unstable." "How unstable?" "Bad enough that I'm using a calm voice." Cole did not like that answer. He dug where Duke indicated. The roots held a waterproof bag wedged deep in frozen mud. It took both men to work it loose without tearing the material. Inside were a folded map, a small photo packet, 2 empty ration wrappers, and a satellite phone wrapped in cloth. The phone was cracked across the face, dead. Cole opened the map. It was hand-drawn over a printed county section marked with lines, circles, and notes in Matthew's handwriting. The survival circuit was there. Red Meadow, Cedar Shelter, Creek Notch, South Slope Cache, Ice Road. Below that, near the ravine bend, Matthew had written, "Winter Cave, if no return." Cole's fingers tightened. Caleb unfolded the photo packet. The top picture showed Cole and Matthew years earlier beside a pickup truck, both younger, both sunburned, both holding fish too small to justify the pride on their faces. Cole looked away too late. The next photo was of Duke, younger, fuller, sitting beside Matthew in summer grass with a red bandana around his neck and his head tilted as if annoyed by the whole idea of posing. Duke sniffed the photo and touched it with his nose. That undid Cole more than the dog tag had. "He had you," Cole whispered. Duke did not look at him. He stared down the ravine, ears forward. Caleb examined the satellite phone. "Last numbers are stored." He tried the cracked power button. Nothing. Cole looked. The screen remained dead, but the casing had a label scratched by knife point. Cole W. Below it, the numbers of Cole's old cell were etched into the plastic. Not once, twice. Then again harder, as if Matthew had tried to carve connection into a device that would not answer. Cole had to sit back on his heels. The ravine swayed at the edges of his vision. For 6 years, he had believed Matthew called once and then vanished into silence. Here was proof of more attempts. Here was the brother who had tried, perhaps from this very ledge, with frozen hands and a broken phone, to make the world open a door. Cole covered his face with one glove. Snow melted against his skin. Caleb turned away to give him privacy. That kindness was clumsy and perfect. Duke leaned into Cole's knee. The dog's body was hot from fever, cold from weather, and too thin between both. Cole rested a hand on his back. "I should have come sooner." The words left him without permission. Caleb's radio crackled before silence could answer. Static. Then Miriam. "Cole Natalie says if that dog is still moving, he is only doing it because his heart is more stubborn than his body." Copy. "That means carry him." Duke looked offended again. Cole almost laughed. "Copy." He pulled the sling from his pack and secured it around Duke's chest and belly. Duke tolerated the indignity with the face of a judge listening to bad testimony. Caleb scanned the slope above them. We should move. The map says winter cave near the bend. The avalanche warning says we should not be here. Matthew wrote that note knowing Duke might reach me. He also wrote it before this storm. Cole folded the map and tucked it inside his jacket. His decision had already formed, which did not make it wise. We checked the bend from the road. Caleb stared at him. We checked from distance. Fine. You say fine like it means nothing. It means I heard you. That is not the same. Duke made a low sound. Both men turned. The dog was staring at the ravine wall beyond the bend. There, nearly hidden behind snow-crusted branches, another strip of blue cloth moved in the wind. Not old. The color was too bright. Cole felt the air leave him. Caleb followed his gaze and cursed softly. The ice road curved toward the ravine at a place where the outside edge had collapsed into a steep chute. The blue cloth hung below that collapse. Something had gone over, maybe a pack, maybe a tarp, maybe a man. The slope above them made a deep, popping sound. It was not loud. It did not need to be. Caleb's face changed. We leave now. Duke twisted in the sling, desperate to move toward the cloth. Cole held him tight. Duke, no. The dog struggled harder, thin body suddenly full of a force that was not strength, but loyalty wearing its last coat. Caleb grabbed Cole's shoulder. If that slope breaks, nobody gets found. Another crack ran across the snowfield above the road, a dark seam opening under fresh powder. Cole looked at the blue cloth, then at Duke, then at the map in his jacket. He understood the message now. Matthew was below the ice road, and the mountain was beginning to move. The ravine below the old ice road swallowed light early, and the snow above it had begun to crack like glass under a hidden hand. North of Red Meadow, the whole mountainside seemed to hold one cold breath, while Cole, Caleb, and Duke stood beneath the warning line. Caleb tightened his grip on Cole's shoulder. We leave. Cole stared at the blue cloth below the collapsed edge. It fluttered once, small and human against the white. Duke twisted in the sling with a sound that cut through every argument. Not panic. Recognition. Cole looked at Caleb. Call SAR. Already did. Then anchor me. Caleb's eyes hardened. That is not a plan. It is the beginning of one. The beginning gets people killed. So does waiting. The two men stared at each other while powder slid in thin streams down the slope. Caleb was afraid. Cole saw it now, and not the kind of fear that made a coward. The useful kind. The kind that counted bodies before pride could volunteer them. Duke made the sound again, lower, almost pleading. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. Distance check only. I need to see what is under that tarp. Distance check, Caleb repeated. Then we decide. Cole accepted the lie because both of them needed it. They moved to a thicker stand of trees where Caleb built an anchor around two trunks and a buried dead man brace under the snow. His hands did not shake. That mattered. Cole clipped into the rope, secured a second line around Duke's sling, and checked the knot twice. Duke objected to being tied like luggage by giving Cole the coldest look ever produced by a starving German shepherd. I am saving your life. Duke blinked slowly. Fine. I am interfering with your command structure. Caleb snorted despite himself. The small sound warmed nothing, but it kept the fear from owning all the air. Cole eased down toward the ravine bend. The slope was steep, broken by roots and ice ribs. His boots sank, slipped, found purchase, lost it again. His old shoulder burned with a bright personal hatred. Above him, Caleb fed rope with careful rhythm. Duke came behind in the sling, half walking, half supported, refusing to let the line carry more of him than necessary. "You could let physics help," Cole muttered. Duke ignored him. The blue cloth grew closer. It was tied to a broken branch with a strip of medical tape. Below it, wedged between roots and a slab of ice, lay a bundle covered in faded green tarp. Cole's body went quiet. Training stepped forward. Fear stepped back, not gone, but ordered to wait. He cleared snow from the tarp with both hands. The surface beneath was shaped wrong for a pack. Too long, too narrow. Human. "Caleb," Cole called. His voice sounded far away. "I have a person." The rope went still. "Status? Unknown." Duke lunged the last foot and dropped beside the tarp, pressing his nose to a gap in the fabric. He made a low, choked sound, then began pawing at the snow despite the bandage. "Stop," Cole said. "Let me." The dog backed only when Cole put a firm hand on his chest. Cole cut the tarp loose with his knife. The fabric peeled back stiffly. At first he saw a beard, then a cheekbone sharp under skin gone gray with cold, then a mouth cracked blue at the edges. Matthew Whitman lay curled beneath layers of ruined plastic and thermal fabric thinner than any memory had prepared Cole to bear. His brown hair was long frozen in strands against his forehead. His face had the hollow look of a man carved by winter and shame. There was a bandage wrapped around one arm, filthy but deliberate. Another strip crossed his ribs. His hands were tucked close to his chest inside torn gloves. For one impossible second, Cole could not move. All the years stopped around him. Matthew at 10, throwing snowballs with terrible aim. Matthew at 19, grinning beside a truck they had fixed badly. Matthew at 38, voice on a phone asking for quiet. Matthew here. Not memory, not paperwork, not a grave without earth. Here. Duke pressed his body against Matthew's side and began to tremble. Cole forced himself back into the world. "Matthew." No response. He cleared ice from Matthew's mouth, tilted his head carefully, and checked for breathing. Nothing obvious. Then a small fog touched the air, so thin, so nearly missed. Alive. Cole's hand found Matthew's neck. The pulse was weak, slow, and stubborn as a candle in wind. "Alive!" he shouted. The word tore out of him. Caleb's voice came back sharp. "Repeat." "He is alive." For a heartbeat, there was only wind. Then Caleb said, "SAR is 12 minutes out if weather holds." Weather would not hold. Cole knew it by the sound under the snow, a deep settling that made the slope feel less like ground than a sleeping animal deciding whether to turn. He slid a thermal blanket under Matthew as far as he could. He cut away the wet outer layer near the torso, kept the limbs covered, and placed heat packs near the core. Slow warmth. Controlled warmth. No panic. Tenderness could wait in line behind technique. Duke shoved his body closer to Matthew's ribs. The dog was shaking from fever and exhaustion, but he pressed himself into that space as if his thin warmth could argue with death. "Good boy," Cole whispered. The words came out broken. Duke did not look away from Matthew. Cole checked the airway again. Matthew's lips moved. No sound came. "I am here." Cole did not know whether Matthew could hear him. "I got the call this time." That nearly destroyed him. He bent his head for one breath and then worked faster. Caleb descended partway with the medical rope pack, face-tight eyes scanning above them every few seconds. "Slide risk increasing," I need 5 minutes. You have 3 before I become unpleasant. You already are. Then I become correct. Cole almost laughed. It came out like a cough. Together they secured Matthew for movement, but the ravine made every angle cruel. They could not lift him without sending loose ice down the chute. They could not wait without losing heat. Duke growled suddenly. Both men looked up. Above the old road, the crack in the snowfield widened. A soft rushing sound began, distant but growing. Caleb's face went white beneath windburn. Cole! I hear it. The radio screened static, then a woman's voice cut through. Flathead SAR, approaching from South Ridge. Cole looked at Matthew's face, pale and still under the blanket. Duke stood over him with teeth bared at the mountain itself. The rushing above them deepened. Snow began to move through the trees like a white tide. Caleb clipped the emergency line to Matthew's litter sling and shouted into the radio for immediate extraction. Cole put his body between Matthew and the slope, as if muscle could negotiate with an avalanche. The world turned to white noise. Then a flare rose from the ridge above, red against the storm, and voices shouted through the trees. The storm over Red Meadow broke into flying snow and red flare light, turning the ravine into a place that felt half real and half remembered. Above the old ice road, the Flathead rescue team moved through the white with ropes, helmets, and headlamps shining like small, stubborn stars. Laura Jensen descended first. She was 42, lean and strong, with auburn brown hair braided tight under a red helmet, green eyes sharp as cut glass, and the kind of calm that made panic feel embarrassed to be in the room. She reached the ledge, glanced once at Matthew, once at Duke, and once at the slope above. You found him alive? Cole nodded. Barely. Barely counts. That was the only comfort she offered, and it was exactly enough. 2 rescuers followed with a vacuum mattress, avalanche probes, and a medical pack. Caleb moved as if a switch had been thrown inside him. He stopped being the deputy who quoted procedure. He became hands, rope, anchor, command response. Laura noticed. Ross. Secondary line. On it, snow hissed down the slope in loose sheets. Not the main slide. Not yet. Every sound made Duke bare his teeth. He stood beside Matthew, legs trembling, ears forward, body too thin to look dangerous and too loyal to look weak. When a rescuer reached to move Matthew, Duke growled. Not at the rescuer, at the possibility of losing him again. Cole caught Duke's collar with one hand. Easy. Duke's eyes stayed on Matthew. They are helping him. The dog's growl thinned to a whine. Laura looked at Cole. Can you control him? Yes. Duke chose that moment to lean heavily into Cole's knee and nearly knock him sideways. Laura raised one eyebrow. Inspired confidence. He is having a difficult day. So is my paperwork. Under other weather, Cole might have laughed. Instead, he held Duke while the team wrapped Matthew in insulation, secured his neck, and transferred him onto the rescue litter with slow, ruthless care. Matthew did not wake. His pulse remained weak. His body looked small inside the straps, smaller than Cole could bear. Laura gave orders in a steady rhythm. Main line tight, belay ready, move on my count, watch the cornice. No one spoke unless needed. That silence reassured Cole more than any speech could have. Competence had its own prayer. Halfway through the lift, the slope above them cracked again. This time the sound was louder. Laura looked up. Move. The word did not rise. It sharpened. Everyone moved. Caleb drove an ice axe into the packed snow and hauled on the secondary line. Cole pushed from below until his shoulders screamed and his vision sparked at the edges. Duke lunged after the litter and slipped. Cole grabbed the sling around the dog's chest. "No!" Duke fought him. "He is going up!" The dog's eyes were wild now, not with fear for himself, but for the body rising away from him. Cole pulled him close. "We go after." Maybe Duke understood the words. Maybe he understood the hand that did not let go. He stopped fighting. The litter rose inch by inch toward the ice road. Snow began to slide behind them, at first loose powder, then heavier chunks tumbling over root and stone. Laura shouted for the team to clear the chute. Caleb braced, face red with strain. Cole felt the rope burn through his glove where he helped guide the litter around a broken stump. Then Matthew reached the road. Hands grabbed the frame. The team pulled him over the edge. Cole exhaled too soon. The slope released a shallow slab below the road, not enough to bury the team, enough to knock a careless man into the ravine. It swept across Cole's boots and hit Duke's legs. The dog went down. Cole dropped with him, wrapping both arms around the thin body. Snow slammed against Cole's hip and spun him half around. Caleb shouted his name. The belay line caught. For 3 seconds, Cole saw nothing but white. Then the motion stopped. He lay on his side, rope tight across his harness, Duke under his chest, both of them breathing like broken engines. Duke sneezed snow into Cole's jacket. Cole laughed once, loud and shocked. "You are a terrible hiking partner." Duke blinked up at him, offended, but alive. Caleb hauled them upward with help from a rescuer whose blonde beard had become a white beard in the storm. At the road, Laura checked Duke with one practiced glance. "Dog rides out." Duke tried to stand, his legs folded. "That was not a suggestion," Laura said. Cole liked her immediately. They wrapped Duke in a blanket and secured him near the gear sled while Matthew's litter moved toward the snowcat waiting on the south ridge. Cole walked beside the litter, one hand on the rail. No one told him to move away. Perhaps Laura understood that some orders cost more than they saved. At the ridge, a helicopter could not land because of the whiteout, so the team loaded Matthew into the snowcat for the descent to the ambulance staging point. Duke lifted his head from the blanket and whined when the litter vanished into the vehicle. Cole climbed in after it. Laura blocked him with one arm. "You are bleeding." Cole looked at his glove. The rope burn had opened his palm. Later. "You are also hypothermic." Later. She looked at Caleb. Caleb shrugged. "He has been like this since birth, according to local evidence." Laura studied Cole, then stepped aside. "Do not pass out in my patient space. I will schedule it for another day." Duke was lifted in next, wrapped like a badly offended burrito. He placed his muzzle against Matthew's boot and closed his eyes. The ride down blurred into engine noise, radio traffic, and Cole's hand resting near Matthew's shoulder without quite touching him. At the ambulance, paramedics took over. Kalispell Regional had a trauma team ready. Dr. Natalie Hayes was notified about Duke. Miriam was notified about everyone, which meant everyone would hear about it twice and properly. Cole rode in the ambulance because Laura allowed it after confirming he was unlikely to be useful anywhere else. He watched numbers on a monitor. He watched Matthew breathe. He watched the brother he had buried in his mind refuse barely but clearly to become a ghost. Hours later, in the hospital's harsh, clean light, a physician told Cole the words that made his knees almost fail. Severe hypothermia, malnutrition, dehydration, infection. Critical, but alive. Alive. Cole sat in a chair beside the bed after they cleaned Matthew, warmed him, placed lines, and wrapped him in blankets that looked too thin for 6 winters. Duke was at the animal clinic under Natalie's care. Caleb sat in the hall with dried blood on his sleeve and would not go home. Miriam arrived with food no one had requested and eyes red enough to start a fight with anyone who mentioned it. For 3 days, Matthew slept. Cole sat. He rehearsed apologies and threw them away. On the 4th night, snow tapped gently against the hospital window. Matthew's eyes opened. For a long moment he stared at Cole, as if deciding whether this was fever memory or mercy. Then his mouth moved. Cole leaned close. Matthew's voice came out rough as gravel. "You still look like you lost a fight with common sense." Cole closed his eyes, and the sound that left him was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. Snow softened outside the Kalispell Hospital, falling in smaller flakes that no longer looked like an army. Inside, under fluorescent lights and the faint smell of antiseptic, Matthew Whitman returned to the world by inches. He learned to swallow broth without coughing. He learned to sit up without shaking so hard the nurse stepped closer. He learned that warm blankets could be trusted, though only after checking the corners like a man searching for exits. Cole learned less gracefully. He learned to sit still. That was harder than rope work. He learned to let doctors speak in full sentences before demanding the part that mattered. He learned that guilt did not become love just because a man carried it for years. Mostly he learned to stay. The hospital room had 2 chairs. Cole used one. Miriam used the other when she visited, which was often enough that a nurse began calling it Mrs. Foster's office. Miriam brought soup, clean socks, a deck of cards, and moral pressure disguised as housekeeping. Caleb came by in uniform, with reports, weather updates, and a paper bag of dog biscuits he claimed he had found in his patrol truck by accident. No one believed him. Natalie visited after clinic hours, smelling faintly of iodine and dog shampoo, with updates on Duke's infection, weight, and opinion of being confined. "He removed 1 bandage," she told Matthew. Matthew's mouth curved. "Only 1. He is maturing." Cole looked at her. "He hid it in my boot." Matthew made a sound that became a cough and then almost laughter. It was small. It lit the room anyway. When Matthew could speak for more than a few minutes, the truth came out in pieces. He had not planned to disappear forever. He had driven north after the voicemail because the walls in town had begun to feel like hands around his throat. He had meant to stay 2 days in a borrowed hunting shelter. The storm trapped him. His truck slid off a side road and broke an axle. He injured his ribs and shoulder walking for help. Then panic took what the weather had not. "I could get close to people," Matthew said one evening, eyes on the window. "I could see cabins sometimes." Cole waited, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles paled. "But every time I thought about knocking, I heard myself trying to explain why I had failed again." His voice thinned. "It was easier to make one more shelter." Cole wanted to say no. He wanted to reject a world where a man could survive a mountain and still be defeated by a door. Instead, he said, "I should have answered." Matthew turned his head. "I should have called again." "You did." Cole told him about the satellite phone, the carved number, the notes, the map. Matthew shut his eyes. "I thought it was dead." "It was." "That sounds about right." They sat in silence. This time it did not punish either of them. Matthew told them about Duke on a snowy evening, while Caleb stood awkwardly near the sink, pretending not to listen. Duke had appeared after the 2nd winter, not as thin as he was now, but hungry, wary, and dragging a length of broken rope from his harness. Matthew shared rabbit broth with him. Duke refused to eat while watched. Matthew turned around. Duke ate everything and pushed the empty tin cup into his boot. "Bossy from the beginning," Cole said. A born administrator, Matthew whispered. The dog stayed. He found water under ice. He led Matthew to deer trails. He slept against him during nights when cold and despair came together. On the worst nights when Matthew put his head in his hands and decided he had become too much trouble for God and man alike, Duke pressed his muzzle under Matthew's wrist until he moved. He would not let me disappear quietly, Matthew said. Caleb looked down at the biscuit bag in his hand. No one teased him. Not then. 2 weeks passed. Matthew moved from critical care to a regular room. Duke moved from Natalie's clinic to Cole's cabin under strict rules, which Duke treated as vague suggestions. Cole drove back each night to feed him, change the bedding, and report to the dog in complete sentences, because Duke seemed to accept nothing less. The cabin changed while Cole was too tired to prevent it. Miriam put clean curtains in the kitchen. Caleb stacked firewood without asking. Natalie labeled Duke's medicine in block letters and taped the schedule to the wall. Someone, probably Miriam, put a second chair near the stove. Cole pretended to resent it. He did not move the chair. The night Miriam's chimney clogged, Duke proved that recovery did not mean retirement. Cole had fallen asleep at the kitchen table with his head on his arms. Duke woke him with a low, urgent whine and a paw against his boot. Not now. Duke shoved harder. Cole opened his eyes and smelled smoke. Not stove smoke. Wrong smoke. Sharp, dirty, close. He grabbed his coat and ran toward Miriam's house, with Duke limping beside him like an old sergeant late for inspection. Caleb's patrol truck appeared from the lower road almost at the same time, lights flashing without siren. He had seen the smoke from the bend. Together, Cole and Caleb broke the back door, crawled through the low haze, and found Miriam slumped near the hallway, coughing but conscious. Duke stood outside in the snow, barking once whenever they drifted too far from the door. It was the loudest Cole had ever heard him. They got Miriam out before the smoke thickened. She woke fully on Cole's porch, wrapped in blankets, furious enough to be healthy. "My door," she rasped. Caleb looked relieved. "You are welcome. It was a good door." Duke pushed his nose into her blanket. Miriam's eyes filled, though she blamed the smoke. The next afternoon, Caleb placed a folder on Cole's kitchen table. Matthew sat in the second chair, home from the hospital for a supervised visit, thin and pale, but alive. Duke lay between the brothers with his head on Cole's boot and his tail touching Matthew's shoe. Miriam, Natalie, and Caleb stood nearby in the uneasy silence of people who had already decided something and were waiting for the stubborn man to arrive. Cole opened the folder. Application for White Pine Haven, Veteran and Working Dog Recovery Program. The cabin property had enough land. The county had grants. Natalie would support medical intake. Caleb would coordinate canine transfers and safety reviews. Miriam had already written a meal schedule, which meant the plan was nearly legally binding. Matthew looked at Cole. "You always did need a mission." Cole stared at the signature line. His hand did not move. Outside, Duke lifted his head toward the trees where winter still waited. Inside, every person in the room waited for Cole to decide whether the cabin would remain a hiding place or become a door. Spring came late to Whitefish, Montana, arriving not with trumpets, but with dripping eaves and the smell of wet pine. Snow still clung to the north side of the cabin, but the old road had begun to show itself again in brown ruts and glittering meltwater. Cole signed the papers on a morning bright enough to make him suspicious. Miriam said sunshine was not a legal threat. Caleb said he would check the statute. Matthew laughed softly from the chair by the stove, and Duke opened one eye as if all three humans were delaying breakfast with unnecessary government. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Cole had signed mission forms, property forms, hospital forms, and the missing person documents that had nearly split his life in half. This signature was different. It did not close a file. It opened a gate. White Pine Haven began as a name on county paper and a muddy field behind the cabin. Then it became fence posts, then gravel paths, then a small insulated kennel building Natalie inspected with the seriousness of a judge. Miriam claimed the supply room and labeled every shelf before anyone had the courage to stop her. Caleb arranged safety protocols, transport agreements, and a quiet partnership with a veteran outreach group in Kalispell. Laura Jensen sent old rescue blankets, 2 avalanche shovels, and a handwritten note that said, "Try not to make me retrieve you twice." Cole framed the note because it seemed wise to respect threats from competent women. Matthew helped slowly. At first, he could only sit on the porch and tell Cole when a fence line leaned. He did this with great commitment. "That post is drunk. That post is temporary. It is temporarily drunk." Cole dug the next hole straighter and pretended Matthew had not one. Some days, Matthew could walk to the gate with a cane. Some days, the hallway was far enough. Recovery did not move like a parade. It moved like thawing ground, soft in one place, frozen hard in another. But it moved. Duke moved too. He gained weight by ounces, then pounds. His coat filled out until the black saddle shone again under the sun. The torn ear remained torn, and the gray at his muzzle made him look older than 5, but his eyes grew brighter. He learned that meals came every day. He did not fully believe it, so he continued hiding biscuits under Matthew's bed. Matthew found 12 in 1 week. Duke looked innocent enough to be convicted immediately. The official adoption came in April. The county clerk, a woman who had known Cole since high school, handed him the paper and did not say anything sentimental. That saved them both. Cole read the name twice. Duke Whitman. Owner, Cole Whitman. Secondary contact, Matthew Whitman. He had to turn toward the window for a moment. The world outside was too bright. When he returned to the cabin, Duke was on the porch beside Matthew, both of them watching a pair of chickadees argue over the feeder Miriam had installed without permission. Cole held up the paper. "Official." Matthew looked at Duke. "He accepts your application." Duke yawned. "With reservations," Matthew added. Cole sat on the step. Duke placed his chin on Cole's knee, then stretched one paw until it touched Matthew's boot. There they were. Not repaired, not untouched. Still scarred, still limping in places no one else could see, but present in the same square of sun. That was enough to begin with. The first dog arrived at White Pine Haven in May, a retired detection shepherd named Ranger who refused to enter the kennel until Duke walked in ahead of him and inspected every corner like a landlord with military standards. The first veteran arrived a week later, a quiet woman named Paige, who stood outside the fence for 20 minutes before stepping through. Cole did not rush her. Matthew brought coffee. Miriam brought muffins. Duke brought Ranger's empty bowl and dropped it at Paige's feet, apparently assigning her to kitchen duty. Paige laughed before she could stop herself. Cole saw her face change just a little. He knew that change. A locked room opening one window. By summer, the place had a rhythm. Mornings smelled of coffee pine shavings, dog food, and lake wind. Natalie checked paws and teeth under the shade roof. Caleb arrived with paperwork and left with hair on his uniform. Miriam kept the books and claimed she was the only reason the operation had not collapsed into masculine poetry and unpaid invoices. Laura led winter safety training even when the grass was green, because mountains remembered what people forgot. Matthew began sleeping indoors more often. Cole began answering the phone. not always on the first ring, but he answered. One evening, after a long day repairing fence and teaching a frightened dog that a leash was not a cage, Cole opened the drawer where he had once kept the old, cracked cell phone. The drawer was empty now. The phone sat on the mantel above the stove beside Matthew's dented tin cup and Duke's broken harness tube. Not as a shrine, not as a wound, as evidence. Some calls come late. Some arrive without signal. Some scratch at the door during a snowstorm with blood on their paws and a message tied under torn canvas. Cole stood there while sunset turned the windows gold. Matthew came in from the porch slower than he wanted, but steadier than yesterday. Duke followed him carrying a stolen work glove in his mouth. "That mine?" Cole asked. Duke walked past him with great dignity. Matthew lowered himself into the chair. "He says possession is complicated." Cole took the glove and Duke released it with theatrical disappointment. For a moment, the three of them listened to meltwater running from the roof. The sound was gentle, almost kind. Cole looked at his brother, then at the dog, who had crossed hunger, ice, fear, and time because loyalty had given him directions. "Thank you," Cole said. He did not know which of them he meant. Matthew nodded as if he understood anyway. Duke set his head on Cole's boot and sighed. Outside, White Pine Haven settled into evening, dog sleeping lights warm in the kennel windows. The forest dark, but no longer empty. Winter would come back. It always did in Montana. But it would not find the cabin sealed against the world. It would find smoke from the chimney, tracks across the yard, a brother's laugh, a dog's watchful eyes, and a door that opened when something wounded came out of the snow. Sometimes grace does not arrive in the form we expect. It may come as a call we missed, a memory we tried to bury, or a thin, wounded dog scratching at the door on the coldest night of the year. Cole, Matthew, and Duke remind us that God can still find the hidden places, even the ones covered by snow shame and years of silence. Many people carry an old regret in their hearts. They wonder if they waited too long, spoke too harshly, or failed someone they loved. This story asks us to believe that mercy can still make a road back. Forgiveness may not erase the storm, but it can give us a hand, a paw, a voice, or a small light to follow through it. If this story touched your heart, comment Amen and share it with someone who needs hope today. Tell someone you love that you are still here. Call the person you have been meaning to call. May God bless your home, heal the quiet wounds you do not show, and guide your steps gently when the road ahead is hidden by snow.